And central and western Scotland especially will see thicker cloud and some showers or patchy rain, but improving here through the course of the afternoon. And still the risk of a shower in some parts of eastern Scotland, around the Pennines, in through the mountainous regions of Wales, for example, and even down into the south of England. The other thing too is we're not immune to a bit of coastal mist developing through the course of the day. Neither are we immune to some sea breezes, which will just knock the edge of the temperatures around the coast, but it still will feel pleasant if you're heading down to the beach. But just move inland, and 28 degrees Celsius in Birmingham is 82 Fahrenheit, and generally feeling better in Northern Ireland and Scotland than it did yesterday. Now for Saturday, again a lovely day, some hot sunshine in the south, more cloud in the north of England, but that should thin through the day and we'll see some sunshine, and later on thicker cloud into the northwest.
The news isn't just a national event.
At least 20 people.
Things will never be like they used to be.
There's real concern now.
Serious health problems.
The economy plunges into crisis situation. It has
See the bigger picture with BBC News 24. In-depth coverage of the international issues of the day.
Violence has become a part of daily life here.
BBC World News. Get a global perspective every morning at 9:30 on BBC News 24.
You know, I'm a good Catholic girl, and I went to church and we sang, "This little candle light on mine."
This little girl of mine don't go nothing like that,
No?
baby. No.
I'm probably not singing it the right way.
You know that this little girl of mine, I want the people to know.
Lee Doucette makes music with Ray Charles in Hard Talk. Tonight at 10:30 on BBC News 24.
Macedonia steps back from the brink of civil war. US officials tell Russia they're going ahead with missile tests. Cuba celebrates the 50th anniversary of its revolution. Italy calls in the army to battle Mount Etna. This is BBC News, I'm Martine Croxall. The EU envoy Javier Solana has said that Macedonia has given itself another chance to move decisively away from civil war. His comments come after a day of talks with Macedonian government leaders and ethnic Albanian politicians in the capital Skopje. The Macedonian president, Boris Tchaikovsky, said peace talks would be resumed with ethnic Albanian leaders in the town of Tetovo, the scene of recent heavy clashes between the two sides. Albanian rebels have also reportedly begun a promised withdrawal from areas in the northwest seized over the past 3 weeks.
Men on a mission to save Macedonia from consuming itself in civil war and countless deaths. The leaders arrived for behind-closed-doors talks with Macedonia's president and rival politicians, a week after the negotiations the international community has been nursing into life collapsed. And they had good news. A ceasefire is back on track, so too the political talks. The West now stands ready to help.
And on behalf of NATO, can I say that our troops are ready and poised to come here to take the guns and the ammunition of the insurgents and to return this country to peace and stability again.
2 busloads of Macedonian civilians showed just what that might look like. These people are returning to their homes in the predominantly Albanian northwest of the country. They say they were ethnically cleansed by rebels. Most picked up possessions and left, but some decided to stay. But they are a minority. Other Macedonian village communities tell a different story of homes abandoned in haste, animals left to root for themselves. Todorka Stankova suffers a heart condition and stayed when the latest bout of fighting erupted 5 days ago. She sheltered with sympathetic Albanians, but when she returned home, found it trashed by the rebels. They were banging on the door with their guns, saying, "Come out," she says. Just look at this, it's horrible. At 78, Bora Boganovska feels equally trapped. I've lived here for 50 years, she says, and I've no intention of leaving. I'm an old woman. If I run, they can kill me. For the moment, though, the guns are largely silent in northwest Macedonia. That gives those trying to maintain the ceasefire a chance to build the confidence of all civilians. Fast work is needed if the political deal, which Western leaders say is just around the corner, is to be clinched. The ceasefire does appear to be holding, but ceasefires in Macedonia have come and gone before, and no one's saying this one is any more robust or enforceable than the others. Paul Anderson, BBC News in Skopje.
From our Washington studio, Harriet Hentges, a Balkans analyst from the United States Institute of Peace, says this may be the final chance for a lasting ceasefire.
Well, I think this is a moment of truth for the political parties in Macedonia. This has gone on now for a very long time, and they can see for themselves how the sides are hardening, how there's more fear, there's more violence. And I don't think they have very many opportunities to recapture it. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to recapture that moment and to build the trust. So I think that with the international community, there has to be pressure, there has to be support. But I think it's time for the political leaders to look each other in the eye and say, what kind of agreement can we forge that we can sell to our people and that we can create an agreement that will keep Macedonia together and build democracy and stabilize this country.
Just briefly, if you can, what options do you think there are to avoid that scenario that you've just outlined?
Well, I think there are different elements of the agreement, and certainly enhancing the local government autonomy and authority is one of them. A decentralization, basically, so that all of the emphasis is not on the central state organs. I think there has to be some recognition of an increased role on the part of the Albanians in both the state organs, but also in their access to various government resources. But at the same time, the Macedonians have to feel that this is not a continual giving up that has no end.
Israeli tanks have been shelling Palestinian police positions near the West Bank town of Ramallah. The attacks came just hours after an Israeli teenager was shot and killed near the entrance to a Jewish settlement north of Jerusalem. The Israeli army said the attack took place when Palestinians travelling in a truck opened fire on a car carrying Israelis. Earlier, 3 bombs exploded next to Israeli vehicles near the West Bank town of Jenin. There were no reports of injuries. Our reporter Paul Wood is in Jerusalem and has been following the story.
The teenager was shot from a white truck which only minutes earlier had been seen firing at children playing in a playground at a neighbouring settlement. According to eyewitnesses, the vehicle in which the teenager was travelling swerved off the road. An ambulance was pretty quickly on the scene, but the teenager died of his injuries. Around 30 Israelis have been killed in these drive-by shootings. It seems to be a tactic which is being used increasingly by Palestinian militants as a way of targeting Israelis, and there is a siege mentality in the Israeli settlements. This has led to an increase in support for illegal groups such as CAC, the Jewish Underground, and the Committee for Road Safety, which is an illegal Jewish group which last week claimed responsibility for killing a 3-month-old Palestinian baby. Now, the danger for the international community in this is that while they work to underpin the official ceasefire, the joint ceasefire between the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, events on the ground are being driven by the extremists from both sides.
The US National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice has said Washington will go ahead with missile defense tests. The tests were banned under the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. Russia is still determined to stick to the pact. But Ms. Rice, on a visit to Moscow, said President Bush had made clear that America faced new threats and needed to move beyond the treaty.
A Russian Satan rocket blasts off from Baikonur. These rockets can be armed with multiple nuclear warheads. Russia recently warned that America could spark a new arms race if it goes ahead with plans for a missile defense. Today, though, it was all smiles as the Russian President Vladimir Putin met a US delegation, including Condoleezza Rice, President Bush's advisor on national security. Yet neither side had anything new to put on the table. Mr. Putin reiterated his support for the 1972 ABM Treaty, which bans missile defences, while Washington said it would push on with tests regardless.
There is a recognition, first of all, that the United States intends to move forward with missile defense. And I think that that is underlying the comments about how we move forward. So you're now getting an argument, a discussion about how we're moving forward, not are we moving forward.
The question is whether America can bring Russia on side as it powers ahead with its plans. The apparent breakthrough by the two presidents when they last met gave rise to hopes of a rapid deal by linking talks on missile defense with cuts to their nuclear arsenals. Yet politicians here warn America mustn't underestimate the strength of Moscow's objections.
They will have to understand that talks mean compromise. Talks not mean the convincing everybody and their own 150% rightness.
The US has made it very clear here today that it intends to push ahead with its tests of the missile defense system, even if that does violate the treaty. So all that's left for the Kremlin to do is negotiate the best deal it can. Caroline Wyatt, BBC News, Moscow.
Thomas Vlasic, an independent analyst whose organisation in Washington has worked closely with both governments in missile defence strategy, told me that the Russians were determined to retain the current treaty.
Well, the Genoa agreement did seem to give an opening. It makes sense to link missile defense to nuclear weapons cuts because both parts of the equation are important to determining nuclear stability. Unfortunately, that's when the political realities hit. There is opposition in Russia to being seen as compromising to the United States, and there is also opposition in the United States itself to cutting nuclear weapons to the levels of perhaps as low as 1,500 warheads, which is what the Russian side is talking about. But most importantly, the United States is simply 2 steps ahead of Russia in thinking of missile defense, whereas Russia is only now coming around to perhaps amending the ABM treaty. The U.S. administration officials are already talking about simply withdrawing from and abandoning the agreement altogether.
How will the presence of Condoleezza Rice at these talks be seen? Has she been sent because she's going to toe the hard line that the Bush administration wants?
Well, no, she's being sent because there did seem to be a genuine opportunity arising from the Genoa summit to arrive at an agreement with Russia. The linkage between missile defense and nuclear weapons cuts did seem to offer the best possibility to date to avoid confrontation between Russia and the United States over missile defense. But the fact is that the two countries are simply too far apart. Their domestic constituencies too entrenched, and I do not see much possibility of progress at the time, even though it would seem to be in Russia's interest to try to pursue some kind of an agreement rather than simply face reality.
There are reports of a powerful explosion which has destroyed a branch of La Caixa Bank in the centre of Barcelona early on Friday. Police reports say 3 passers-by were injured in the blast. The explosion follows the discovery of a car bomb at Malaga airport after a warning from the armed bar separatist group ETA that it would be targeting tourists this summer. Cuba's President Fidel Castro has led a huge anti-America march in Havana. The rally was held to mark the anniversary of the Cuban Revolution, which began nearly half a century ago. The protesters marched past the United States diplomatic office, and speakers at the rally denounced the US economic embargo, called for the release of 5 Cubans jailed in Miami, and condemned US immigration policy. It's estimated that more than 1 million people took part.
For hours they marched along the Havana seafront, past the United States interest section. More than 1 million Cubans, waving flags and carrying umbrellas to guard against the sun. The Cuban authorities said it was the biggest rally since Fidel Castro came to power 42 years ago. He walked at the head of the procession, wearing white running shoes and his traditional military uniform. The 74-year-old president looked robust, out to prove that he was fit and well after he fainted last month. As they marched, school children stood on the stage, reading criticism of US policy towards Cuba. They called for the release of 5 Cubans recently convicted in Miami of spying and lambasted the US economic embargo against the communist island. The Cuban authorities have begun busing people into the center of Havana in the early hours of the morning. The streets were a sea of people for as far as the eye could see. Old people with walking sticks, young couples carrying children on their shoulders. The aim of the stage-managed march was to show Washington and the Cuban people that Fidel Castro was still very much in charge. Daniel Schweimler, BBC News, Havana.
Around 1,000 Mapuche Indians have taken to the streets of Temuco in Chile. The native ethnic group are asking for land the Spanish confiscated from their ancestors in the 15th century to be returned. Several people were injured in the clashes, including 12 police officers. More than 120 people were arrested. Indigenous leader Aucan Huilcaman has threatened the Chilean government with more violence if his ethnic group's claims are not met. The Italian army has called in reinforcements in its battle with Mount Etna, Europe's biggest and most active volcano. Military bulldozers are trying to slow down the stream of lava that's engulfed parts of Mount Etna's ski lift. There are worries that the lava appears to be speeding up again.
Early this morning, after a lull of 2 days, Mount Etna awoke again. To thunderous booms, the volcano gushed a fresh stream of molten lava onto steep slopes, where it quickly built up into a massive flow, as beautiful as it was menacing to the fragile tourist facilities on the mountainside. At dawn, the upper cable car station and several of its pylons succumbed to the intense heat. It looked less a ski resort than a battlefield. A race began to save a mountain refuge and even the cable car base station below. Local authorities called for the army and earth-moving equipment to erect new barriers and channel the lava, flowing still faster this afternoon into a natural bowl.
The lava's coming out in huge quantities and the ground is very steep. It's directly threatening the cable car base station, the Sapienza mountain refuge and the whole tourist area north of Nicolosi.
Though the town of Nicolosi is still safe, many local people are watching Etna engulf their livelihood. 300 work on the mountain, on the wrecked cable car, or in the ski resort, where this winter little snow will settle because of the extreme heat of the lava. Having second-guessed the volcano before and got it wrong, for now, no expert will predict with any certainty when Etna's new onslaught will end. George Eakin, BBC News.
This is BBC News. A reminder of the headlines. Macedonian peace talks are back on track along with the ceasefire, but envoys warn the final few problems will not be easy to solve. The US National Security Advisor has said Washington will go ahead with missile defense tests, originally banned under a 1972 treaty. And still to come, New York's schooling crisis. Newly recruited teachers are being sent on a 5-week crash course. President Bush has welcomed China's release of 2 American academics imprisoned on charges of spying for Taiwan. Gao Jian and Qing Guang were jailed for 10 years on Tuesday, but the Chinese Foreign Ministry said they were being freed on medical grounds. Gao Jian has now arrived back in the United States, where she's been reunited with her husband and son.
Sentenced to 10 years, free after 2 days, Gao Jian flew into Washington with her husband, tired but hugely relieved after being given medical parole by the Chinese authorities.
Right now, I'm overwhelmed by the excitement in seeing my family back here. And I believe that you'll see my story in my article or in my book, which are prohibited by the Chinese government.
Along with Gao Jian, the Chinese have released 2 other US-based academics accused of spying in recent days. President Bush was quick to claim credit for his administration's China policy.
I would hope that part of it's because of the pressure our government's put on China. I spoke directly to Zhang Ximen on this very subject, about the humane treatment of U.S. citizens and or legal residents. And perhaps China is beginning to realize that as she begins to deal with Western nations, she's going to have to make better decisions on human rights.
The timing of these releases, no coincidence. The U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell is in Asia, soon to arrive in Beijing. His trip will lay the groundwork for George Bush's visit to China in the autumn. Both sides, it seems, looking for a period of stability. Inside the White House, quiet satisfaction. Officials believe that George Bush's China policy has so far been effective. But human rights is still a major source of tension, and relations with Beijing continue to present George Bush with perhaps his biggest foreign policy challenge. Stephen Sacker, BBC News, Washington.
Well, the release of the Chinese Americans comes ahead of a visit by the American Secretary of State Colin Powell to China on Saturday. He'll be the highest-ranking US official to visit Beijing since George W. Bush became president. Mr. Powell is due to arrive in South Korea shortly, the second stop on his 5-country Asian tour.
Colin Powell's tour of Asia is taking in visits to both allies and rivals. He'll have to smooth a few feathers ruffled by the policies of President Bush, in particular plans for a missile defence shield. That will certainly feature on Powell's agenda in South Korea. 37,000 American troops are based in the country, guarding the world's last Cold War front line. On the other side lies North Korea, led by an unpredictable regime which has tested long-range missiles and may have weapons of mass destruction, which is one reason why the US wants a missile defense system. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-il, is currently visiting Russia, where he'll discuss a joint response to Washington's plans. Russia has also formed an alliance with China, both countries warning that missile defense could undermine international arms agreements. China in particular is worried. Its nuclear arsenal is less than 1% the size of America's and fears the regional balance of power will be upset. If China builds more missiles to match the US, that could have an effect on the whole of Asia. But with President Bush determined to go ahead with the plan, Colin Powell will need all his diplomatic skills to try and head off a major row. Bill Hayton, BBC News.
The woman who became known as India's Bandit Queen has been cremated. Phulan Devi, who'd given up life on the run for a career in politics, was shot dead on Wednesday in Delhi. Police have yet to identify either a motive for her killing or those responsible. Indian leaders, led by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee, have paid homage to bandit-turned-lawmaker Phulan Devi, who was shot dead by masked gunmen. Both houses of the Indian Parliament were adjourned as a mark of respect. Police in Thailand have arrested 81 people, including a large number of foreigners, suspected of being involved in a multi-million-dollar share-selling fraud. The police say telephone sales staff from 2 companies in Bangkok cheated investors out of more than $150 million, selling stocks which customers often never received. Many of the would-be investors were based in Australia.
The 2 trading firms in Bangkok's business quarter were raided by FBI agents working with Thai and Australian police. The arrests followed a 2-year investigation into what was allegedly a lucrative and global financial scam involving the sale of non-existent stocks. According to officials, investors were cheated out of more than £100 million. Thai police say 81 people were arrested in the raid, among them up to 40 British, along with Irish, American, Australians and other Europeans. At a press conference, journalists were told that the companies appear to have defrauded foreign investors, mainly in Australia and New Zealand, by selling them stocks that didn't exist. Investors later complained they had problems getting their money back and found it was impossible to contact the brokers at all. Police say the companies hired more than 70 foreigners to cold call potential customers. More than 100 investors were solicited by telephone to buy shares of bogus American companies based in Bangkok. Under Thai law, anyone convicted of running an unlicensed securities operation can be jailed for up to 5 years and fined up to $11,000. All of those arrested are being held by Thai police. They could also face charges of working in the country illegally. Louise Bevan, BBC News.
In the central Philippines, about 25,000 people living around the Mayon volcano have been evacuated after an explosion shot smoke more than 10 kilometres into the air and sent clouds of ash and toxic gas down the mountainside. Volcanologists have placed the area on the highest possible state of alert. It's summer school time in the United States, and in New York's public schools, over 300,000 children who've been failing go back into the classroom to try to catch up. With them this year are nearly 350 crash course trainee teachers. They're on a special 5-week fast-track scheme to set them up to teach full-time when the school term starts in September. As our correspondent Jane Standley reports from the Bronx, it's an attempt to address the desperate shortage of teachers in New York City.
A public school in the Bronx. 1 in 5 teaching jobs here are vacant. It's summer school now, the time to play catch-up for pupils who've been failing in class. But when their new term starts in September, New York City needs 8,000 more teachers to help them learn.
The exercise is intended for you to look at the student work.
So some are getting a crash course of only 5 weeks. New recruits like comedy scriptwriter John Rajeski have degrees, but not in education. Coping with the classroom over the next 2 years will be in tandem with more traditional training.
I am teaching the lessons and I am managing the class, so I am getting the skills, but I think it's not until I'm actually there in the classroom doing it every single day that's what's going to make me an effective teacher.
But teaching is so politically sensitive here, John may need all he learned in his old life in Hollywood. Not even allowed to film him in a classroom or his pupils' faces. There's been so much bad publicity about New York public schools. John has a mentor at the insistence of the Board of Education. It's under yet more pressure from a wave of early retirements.
New York's public schools are not the easiest places to teach in, though this one's more modern and has better discipline than most. But recruitment here is still hard, even though the new fast-track training scheme is filling vacancies.
3 fast-track teachers will join the full-time staff here in September, trading often huge pay cuts for no years of night school learning. But critics say the scheme fails. It targets the untried teachers at the most difficult schools.
It makes no sense to bring somebody in who's never been in a classroom and put them in a do-or-die situation. What we should be doing is figuring out how to get experienced people who've dealt with problems before in those problem schools.
But problem schools in areas like the Bronx are the reason why the fast-track scheme got the go-ahead. Other teachers don't want to come here. But as 20% of the rapid recruits quit after the first year, the scheme isn't quite the solution, it seems. Jane Standley, BBC News, the Bronx.
A reminder of the main news. The Western envoys trying to mediate in Macedonia say the peace process is back on track after a week of violent confrontation between government forces and ethnic Albanian rebels. And Israeli forces have been shelling Palestinian positions on the West Bank. This is BBC News.
Good morning. It's been very unsettled in parts of Eastern Europe of late. Low pressure once again is with us here today, so still some heavy and thundery showers. Some showers too in parts of France, but if you're heading off on your holidays, generally around the Mediterranean as well as through the Canaries, we are looking at some fine sunshine, and the same story holds true for tomorrow. Now for ourselves, by the time we get to Sunday, we've got a little frontal system coming into the northwest of Scotland. That's going to introduce some cloud and some light and fairly patchy rain, and it's going to move southeastwards, probably making it into central parts of England and Wales by the time we get to evening. And what it's going to do behind it is introduce some fresher weather. It will still be nice though. We still will see some sunshine coming in, for example, in through the northwest of Scotland. But if you are off on your holidays, the Canaries are looking gorgeous at the moment. In Santa Cruz, 28 degrees Celsius is 82 Fahrenheit. Very nice as well in Madeira, as indeed it is in Iberia, with plenty sunshine on offer. Similarly so around the Costas and also in through the likes of the Balearics, Corsica and Sardinia. But as we saw earlier, the risk of showers through parts of France, and that will continue as we head on into tomorrow. For eastern parts of the Mediterranean, again, there's a lot of sunshine on offer. Highs of 39 degrees Celsius, and roads will feel hot. The sun, of course, is extremely strong. So if you are heading to this part of the world, do bear that in mind. A lot of showers through the Balkans as well. But by the time we get to tomorrow, a lot of those showers should tend to die away. Now, it was lovely yesterday, as you can see, from the lack of cloud around the Mediterranean. In the east, a bulk of cloud produced the rain and indeed some showers through France. And pushing back up in through the United Kingdom as we head in through Scotland. Again, we've had a lot of cloud and some rain, and that's how we're going to continue as we head towards the dawn period. It's not a lot of rain, more of a nuisance value than anything else. For the rest of the British Isles, again, we're looking at some patchy mist and some patchy fog, which could well take its time to clear as we go through the course of this morning. For example, we could have it during this morning's rush hour as late as 9 o'clock, for example. But then we'll see some lovely sunshine coming through, lovely warm sunshine at that, but always more cloud through Northern Ireland, central and also western Scotland, where we could still catch the odd splash of rain. But it will improve here as we go through the course of the afternoon. Now, having said that too, we're also at risk of a shower or two in eastern parts of Scotland, around the Pennines, say for example in through the north of Wales, and generally anywhere in the south where it is hot, but it's only a risk. The other thing as well is we'll see some coastal mist develop around some of the coasts around the British Isles, and also some sea breezes which will just knock the temperatures back a wee bit, but it still will feel nice if you're heading down to the shore today. In the Isle of Wight, for example, we're looking at a high of 22 degrees Celsius, that's 72 Fahrenheit. But push inland up towards the Midlands, for example, and we're looking at 28, that's 82. Again, it will feel much better today through Northern Ireland and also parts of Scotland compared to yesterday. And as the sun comes out in the afternoon, we'll see the temperatures rise. Now for Saturday, again a lot of sunshine on the cards. Hot sunshine down in the south. In London, we're looking at a high of 29 degrees Celsius. Warm sunshine as we push further north. Although having said that, the north of England could well see a veil of cloud to start the day, but that should thin and break as we go through the day. And around the coasts, again, the temperatures are a wee bit lower as sea breezes develop. Then later again, the cloud will thicken in the northwest of Scotland, and we'll see the first signs of some light and patchy rain, which will be moving southwards and eastwards through the course of Sunday, with brighter but fresher weather coming in behind.
For the full picture in global enterprise, World Business Report, next on BBC News 24.
Summer sun and a sea breeze. We all want the time to enjoy the finer things in life. So relax, kick off your shoes and take 10 minutes with Gate 24. Get the latest travel news, tips and great getaways. So whether you're travelling for business or pleasure, we'll help you plan your next trip away. Gate 24, Saturday nights at 8:45 on BBC News 24.
This year's BBC Proms can be enjoyed wherever you are. Driving on Dartmoor with Debussy, on the web while at work with Vaughan Williams.